There are four quotes that provide an incredible context to what the family is. George Santayana said this: "The family is one of nature's masterpieces." Will Durant said, "The family is the nucleus of civilization." Alex Haley said, "In every conceivable manner, the family is the link to our past and bridge to our future." And George Bernard Shaw said, "Perhaps the greatest social service that can be rendered by anybody in this country and to mankind is to bring up a family." The family has changed. 15 to 20 years ago, the statement was, "Families are changing." Well, ladies and gentlemen, that statement is both a past reality and a future norm. What those changes mean have generated scores of conferences and books and research and talk shows and podcasts and newspaper articles and magazines even, and on and on and on. Over the next few weeks on the Wise Idea podcast, I want to invite you into our conversation about family life. We are going to address it from multiple angles and in multiple ways. We'll dig into some pretty difficult conversations and we'll laugh at some others. We're going to talk through parenting and marriage and blended family, singleness, adoption, infertility, and even what families should do about end-of-life care and even death. As we continue to lay out this series and invite our guests, I want to invite you as an audience member to submit questions and engage in our dialogue with us during this particular series of episodes. If you have questions that you would specifically like for us to address or deal with or even wrestle with, feel free to send us an email to info, I-N-F-O, at thewiseideapodcast.com. Again, that's info, I-N-F-O, at thewiseideapodcast.com. You can also direct message us, DM us, or inbox us on Instagram or Facebook. Now, let's jump in to our conversation about family life.
Welcome to the Wise Idea weekly podcast with Christopher J. Harris, focusing on life, leadership, family, marriage, and the church. We are providing tools for our inspiration and wisdom for life. Our goal is to inspire everyday people to live wise lives. If you're new to us, we release a brand new podcast weekly on Thursdays. Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode. Here's our host, Christopher J. Harris.
Hello, my friends. Welcome again to another episode of the Wise Idea Weekly Podcast with Christopher J. Harris. I am your host, Christopher J. Harris, and I'm so excited to have you guys tune in with us for another week. Man, it has been an amazing journey, and this series that we are in, it's a tearjerker. It's a one that makes you contemplate. It is some aha moments. It is pull your notepad out and take some notes. It is epiphany moments. It is let's sit down and have a family meeting moment. It's all of that rolled into one. It's some laughter moments, all of that. We are in our family life series, and it has been an amazing time already. Today is going to be no exception, and I can't thank each of you enough. So many of you hit us on a regular basis, both on email and social media, and you literally share your testimonies and epiphany moments and stories of transformation and insight that you're gaining from the podcast. And I'm very, 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 very thankful for it. I was in Cincinnati, Ohio a few weeks ago. That's here in the United States, and had somebody that was in the audience that I was speaking with came up to me after that particular program and said, "Thank you so much for what you shared today. But I just want to let you know that I also listened to your podcast," and gave me some very specific details about which podcast they listened to and all of that. So that was very, very exciting for me to encounter somebody in Cincinnati, Ohio, that also follows my podcast. So I'm excited about that. Listen, I am very, very passionate about life and leadership and family and marriage, and in particular, how to do those things in a way that is wise. I believe that when wisdom becomes a part of your life, your entire life gets better. And so make no mistake about it, wise ideas positively change the course of your lives. And so that's what we want to do. We want to give you wisdom for your family. And we're going to do that in multiple ways. Last week, I had my wife on and we talked about what it looks like to effectively parent. Today, we're going to take a different approach. We're going to take a different angle on that. And I've got some guests with me today, some amazing guests who are a part of our church. They do some amazing things on multiple levels with children and with kids. And I thought that it'd be great to have them on to share a little bit about their story, because the truth of the matter is what families look like today is very, very different. And we are all dealing with lots of different unique realities, realities where it's not just a situation where it's dad and mom and two kids and a dog with a picket fence outside and all of that. But we've got lots of other dynamics and all the things that come along with that. So help me welcome to the Wise Idea, the White family. Marty and Jeanine White. What's up, guys?
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing absolutely amazing. Thank you guys for making time to be on the Wise Idea podcast and to share a little bit about your story. And we'll dig into a whole bunch of stuff today. But particularly, let me just kind of give everybody the umbrella of what we're dealing with here. We're going to be dealing with what it looks like to have not conceived your own children just yet, but to pour your life into other children through foster care and adoption and working with those two systems and all that comes along with that. And even to do ministry to kids who are often the least, the last, and the left out in some of our urban neighborhoods, which is something that you do on a regular basis, Mark. So we're going to deal with all of that today. Is that cool?
It sounds good to me. Awesome.
So let's jump in. Jeanine, let's start with you first. Let's do this. Just tell us a little bit about your background, you guys' background, and where both of you guys have come from in terms of your history, your story, and then we'll take it from there.
I grew up in a single family home with my mom. I did see my dad, but we didn't live in the same house. So we always struggled, and my dad was big into ministry, and he was one of those dads who let the ministry overtake his marriage, and he had 2 failed marriages because of it, because he was always doing homeless ministry. And so growing up, I almost had a resentment towards homeless people because they literally lived in our house, ate our food. Like, it was terrible for me as a kid, and I saw how they took advantage of him. But something I always saw as a child was the children that were with these parents. And I'm like, it's not these kids' faults that their parents are, doing all these terrible things. The parents are doing terrible things. They're the adult, So I remember thinking as a young kid, I always want to help kids that, can't help themselves. So I'm not saying helping homeless is bad. I'm just... That was my perspective growing up.
That's awesome. All right. And Marty?
I grew up in the neighborhood nobody wants to drive through. And I had all of the friends that you get when you grow up in that kind of a neighborhood. I bounced around to several different middle schools, to 5 different high schools because of behaviors. I remember in 9th grade, I had a teacher look me in the face and tell me that I was going to grow up to be nothing. At the time, I was in high school, so I was trying to play it off like it. I don't care, you're trying to be cool. But the truth was, when somebody like that says something like that to you, it really does. It hurts. It has an impact. And I kind of agreed with them, because of I had all the wrong friends. I got on always getting in trouble. And so as I got older, And, I became a Christian. I gave my heart to the Lord. I've always had a passion to be the person in the lives of some of these kids, to be the person that I wish I had when I was their age. And so I've always been drawn to the kids that no one else wants to work with. And those are always the kids that appeal to, because that's who I was when I was that age. And so sometimes I'll even tell the kids that all I'm telling you guys is the stuff that I wish somebody had told me when I was you. And so, that's how I got to doing what I do now.
It's interesting. I mean, this isn't necessarily what we'll focus on a lot of different things about children today and the different nuances of families and how family life evolves. But I think you just said something really powerful, that even as adults, we really, really, really have to be sensitive and take care with the word choice that we use with children, because those things, I mean, I think all of us have had situations where an adult said something to us when we were children or young people that has stuck with us. And those words are seeds that get planted. And, it's almost like that audio tape that just is on repeat in our minds, that those words just then start cycling through. And so, as you said, you agreed with what the person said, even though it was out of God's will for your life. You agreed with it, rehearsed it, and then probably lived down to that expectation.
Well, I was thinking about this the other day. It has become kind of a cliche for people to use the phrase "my inner child." Back several years ago, that was a very popular phrase. Always talking about my inner child, the child that's inside me. But the reality is, we do have an inner child. Those memories, those feelings you felt when you were that age, you carry around with you the rest of your life. You're still that person. You've just gotten older and had new experiences, but those other experiences didn't go away. Those other feelings didn't go away just because you've matured. And so, when a parent or an adult speaks to a child, it really does matter. Even flippant, off the cuff things, sometimes you'll say to children that you think are unimportant, that may be something that child might carry with them for years. I mean, I think all of us can look back at moments in our life when people spoke things into our life and we couldn't let it go, it really is important how you speak to children.
Even if you apologize, I mean, I think we have to be stewards of our words. I remember hearing that story, where, and we'll talk about this and then move on to the other stuff, but that story where, the person, hammered the nail into the wood. And that's each time that the nail gets hammered into the wood, that represents, you speaking a word. And it's a wrong word, but then when you apologize, you pull the nail out. Well, the hole is still in the wood, right? So you apologized,
right,
but the hole is still there, right? And so I think people really don't have a grasp often of the significance of the words that we speak. And then even if you apologize, doesn't necessarily mean you may have taken the nail out, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you fill the hole that's there. So we can talk more about that some other time. So you guys are foster parents, have walked through the process or walking through the process of adoption. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about how you got there and how you became foster parents.
Well, it started with, we've always had a desire to have our own children, to work with children. In fact, we often joke that when me and my wife first met, when you have this first date conversations, what is your dream? What do you want to do with your life? And the first thing she said was, I want to take care of and feed hungry children. Was the first thing Jeanine said. And that touched my heart. And so we have not had any of our own children yet, but we still have the desire to help to have kids. And so we started looking into foster care, I think originally just kind of on a whim, just looking into it. We had some friends that were house parents at a group home and told us about some of their experiences. And so as we got into foster care, started doing the foster care training, we found that there was a really massive need. The amount of children in foster care in the country and in our state in Florida is astronomical. there's such a need for people to care for these children. And so we went specifically, after doing the normal foster care training, we did some additional training into what's called therapeutic foster care training, which is where we deal specifically with kids that have experienced trauma and neglect, kids that have exhibited behavioral issues because of the trauma they've gone through. And so it's when God puts something on your heart, it's almost hard to explain to someone who doesn't have that same calling. How do you explain the thing that God has called you to do to someone? Does that make sense? I don't want to get into sort of vague, overly spiritual sounding things, but I think a lot of it was just God, because of our past experiences, because of our desire to work with children, and seeing the amount of need there was. God just sort of moved us in that direction, and we've been there ever since.
So thank you for sharing that. Let's back up a little bit to the space where you guys as a husband and wife wanted to bear your own children. What did that look like for you in your journey as it relates to your faith, and how you reconciled God being a good God and you not being bitter about that and all of that? I'd love to hear from both of you guys about what that looks like. And I ask that in the context that, there's so many individuals and couples, both men and women, who really struggle with trusting God for who he is when something that I desire so strong has never been granted.
I would go ahead and say after we had been married for about a year, we decided we wanted to have our own biological children. And after about trying for a year, I went to the doctor and they said, we're going to have to refer you to a specialist. That doesn't look like you're going to be able to conceive naturally. And Marty and I just prayed, because they were going to have to do lots of tests and lots of procedures. And there's lots of money, involved with that. But I told him that I didn't want to go through any of that, because I believe that we serve a big, big God. And if he wants us to have our own kids, it can happen. I said, so when we do conceive, I want it to be a miracle there where God can have all the glory. And I know there are a lot of people that do IVF treatments, and I'm not speaking bad about that, but I just didn't feel it was for us. I didn't feel, we have the capacity to, help these children. So why don't we do that while we're in this period of waiting?
And so we're still, we've been married, is it 9 years now or 8 years?
8 years.
We've been married 8 years now. That's something I should probably remember. And so we're still relatively young in this marriage. It's not,
yeah,
we haven't been married for 20 years.
Tip for all the husbands: know how long you've been married.
Yeah.
Write it down. That's all I'm saying. And so it's, we've only been trying for, 6-7 years now. So, there are some couples that I know try for 10, 20 years, but we really did talk a lot about it, prayed a lot about it. And we decided that, again, we serve a big, big God, and there's nothing he cannot do. And so in the meantime, we're going to look after some children that, for whatever reason, don't have parents in their lives that can speak into their life.
Well, that's very powerful. I can't speak to their faith, but I remember sitting down with my wife a few months ago and listening to an interview with Dwayne Wade and Gabrielle Union Wade. Dwayne Wade is, of course, a NBA basketball player here in the United States, and Gabrielle Union Wade is, well-known celebrity and actress and movie person and all those things, and I think also as a producer. So I don't want to shortchange her, but both of them obviously are very well known, and they talked about their process of having a surrogate and what that looks like, and Gabrielle had gone through a long, lengthy process of, as you just mentioned, Jeanine, of IVF and, lots of tests and lots of money. And obviously they have the means to put a lot of money towards, trying to figure that out from a medical standpoint. And I remember watching that interview, and Dwayne Wade basically said, that at one point he basically looked at his wife and said, okay, enough is enough. Okay, you've done this test, you've taken this medicine, you've taken these pills, you've done these shots, you've done this, you've ran that, and you're trying to literally count down to the day, or I need to do it on, we need to do certain things on this day to make this happen, and just all of that. And he finally looked at his wife and said, enough is enough. And so I just kind of, I don't want to be couth in any way with this conversation. I've not been in that seat at all. But I just want to speak to those folks that have dealt with the roller coaster of emotions and wrestling with their faith journey with that. And so I'd love for you guys to speak to that some in terms of, what would you say to couples who are in that space where they're either trying or they got lots of questions. I've even had couples that have asked, is it biblical to do IVF, or is it, okay with God? So what would you say to those couples that are in that space where they're really just kind of dealing with all of that?
I think the first step is to acknowledge that it's okay to feel how you feel. I think there's a lot of guilt involved, especially among believers, of, am I not trusting God enough? Am I doubting God? But God gave us emotions for a reason. If you're sad, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to, but the important thing is you bring it to God. You don't use it as a wedge to take you away from God. Because there is it's a very emotional issue. As far as the medical side of it, to be honest, Jeanine can probably speak more to the medical side of what the doctors told her, but we're not opposed to medical intervention if it works and if it's necessary. I'm not very studied on the sort of biblical connotations of procedures like IVF, but I've always been a believer that God allowed doctors to God could work through doctors too. And so we're not opposed to medical intervention or treatment, but we just feel in our case that's not what God wanted us to do. So if that's an option for you, pursue it. But there is a very real danger and there's a theory, and I don't want to go overly long on this, but a thing I call the pinky toe theory, which is if you've ever stubbed your pinky toe in the middle of the night. Now, normally your pinky toe, you never think about your pinky toe at all. It's just something that never comes up in conversation. You don't talk about your pinky toe. You don't think about your pinky toe until you hit the bedpost at 2 a.m. and suddenly your pinky toe becomes this incredibly painful, huge, important issue that suddenly it's the most important thing in your world because it hurts. Many times when something hurts, it becomes more important than everything else, even though something that you probably wouldn't have thought about a moment before it hurt. Once you feel that hurt, that becomes your whole world. And it's a danger, especially because, again, this is a very sensitive, people are very emotional when it comes to this type of thing. It's important to not allow the hurt to be the most important thing. Acknowledge it, it's real, but you have to bring it to God, not let it push you away from God. Because that's, when Jeanine was going to the doctors and they were telling her all of these things and wanting all these tests, it was an emotional time for us. And so, the temptation is to question, oh, why God, why, and you start comparing to other people. Look at them. They have X amount of children. Look at that person over there. They have children. How come we can't have children? And so that can lead down some very dangerous paths emotionally. And then you have the other side of, you have very well-meaning believers who will say things like, you should never question the Lord and you shouldn't be upset. Well, you know why? You should be upset. It's okay to be upset. The question is what you do when you're upset. And so the first thing is just acknowledge, it hurts and it's sad. And and acknowledge all of the feelings that come about as a part of this, but then take those feelings to God, which is what we did. And then in this process, God showed us all of the hundreds of thousands of children that have no parents in their life to speak into their life. And so God just showed us that maybe right now we're not supposed to have our own kids, because there are other kids that we can pour into their lives that need someone. And so that's where but that came about because we took it to God instead of trying to run away from it.
Yeah, that's so good, man. Just in terms of the healthiness of your walk with God, I think it's in any case, whether it's parenting or whether it's habits or whether it's strongholds or frustrations in life or professional pursuits, whatever it may be. All of us that live this Christian life, at the end of the day, we have to make a decision about whether we trust God or not, and then how do we trust God with our questions. And one of the most revelatory things for me that occurred a number of years ago is to actually understand this notion that God can handle our questions, right? And it sounds sort of trivial in a sense, but on the other end, for me, and this was maybe 10 years ago, it was a light bulb moment that I felt like I had these questions, and on one level, I was wondering, can I give these questions to God? Or like you said, am I supposed to question him? But then you get this revelation. Think about it. This is the God of heaven and earth. He can handle our questions, right? And
the supreme creator of all the universe is not intimidated by your small doubts and questions and words. He has the answers. He's not shaken.
Right. So we'll definitely.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say we'll definitely pray for couples that before we end today that are dealing with those realities. I think one of the other things that I would encourage that I've observed from folks who are really just contemplating these questions and dealing with these real life realities is to be in community, and healthy community in many places as well. One of my very first episodes, I think maybe this was episode 3 or 4 of my podcast when we got started, I interviewed a young lady who has another podcast, Sevilla Morgan. She has a podcast called Childlessness, Not by Choice. And I had her on the podcast. It was an incredible interview. I would encourage anybody to go back and listen to that. It's one of the first 5, I believe, episodes that I did, and just so insightful. And one of the takeaways from that conversation that I had with her was that she helps ladies who have never been able to conceive or have children to live in community, or to at least be connected to other women, where they get together on a regular basis and connect and conversate and cry together and ask questions together and all those kinds of things. So I think one of the inherent things that we're saying through today's conversation is you got to be in healthy community in those spaces where you're being supported and prayed for and lived out. So you made the decision as a couple. You know what? God's got a greater plan. We trust God. Okay, we kind of put ourselves together and make sure that you're maintaining a healthy marriage through this process. But we're going to pour into other children. So surely foster parenting isn't just black and white and easy. Or is it?
No, not even kind of.
No, I always say, not to interrupt Marty, okay, but when we went into the group home to be the house parents, we were there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We had, at the boys' home, there was 6 teenage boys, and the girls' home, there was 8 teenage girls. And I always say that was the hardest time in our marriage, because we went from having no kids to having all the kids, it felt like. And they weren't just, kids that, we had raised since infancy. They were children that had real anger issues, real mommy issues. I can't tell you how many times these kids told me they were going to kill me in my sleep. And I'm probably sure they might have tried if we had given them the chance. But I remember there were days that I just stayed in the room and I cried, and I was like, God, I don't understand, how we're doing this or why we're doing this. These kids don't, they don't appreciate us. But I had to get over the personal feelings, because once I learned the children's stories, they weren't mad at me. They weren't mad at Marty. They were mad at their past. They were mad at their parents. And unfortunately, we were there on the receiving end of that. But the biggest breakthrough we had was there was a 16-year-old boy there that had hated me since the moment I stepped in that door. He had severe trauma, severe abuse, and he just hated me. And we were driving one day in the van, and one of the other boys started screaming at me. And that 16-year-old boy that, said he hated me so much, he spoke up and he's like, you need to stop yelling at Miss Jeanine right now. And that boy said, you hate her too. Why does it matter? And he said, don't you realize that these are the only parents we have in our life and the only people that haven't left us? And for me, that was that God moment. Like, this is why you're doing it. Even though they're not showing that appreciation every day, the words that we're speaking to them, the time that we're taking with them is making a difference in them, even though they're not acting like it. So that was when, we left the group home, we realized, okay, this is the journey. And we still keep in contact with so many of our kids. But we thought, oh, we'll never hear from them again. It's the kids you don't think will contact you, or want you in their life after.
Yeah, a 16-year-old boy, as a side note, he's 18 now, and he still messages me and wants to hang out. He hated our guts. Like, he threatened to fight me. And I don't know if I know on the podcast you can't see me, but I'm not the kind of guy people normally pick fights with. And he would ball up his fists and, I'm like, and he'd always get mad because I wasn't intimidated by him. Well, now he's 18 and he'll call me just out of the blue, go, hey, you wanna hang out? And so that was, I think, an eye-opening moment for both of us, because we started foster care by jumping in the deep end. We started as house parents at a therapeutic group home for foster teenagers with no parents.
So Marty, tell everybody what that means. Right. So tell everybody what that means. That literally means that you lived in the home with the children, right?
Right. Yeah, it was actually our first experience with foster care after we did our training. It's a group home setting where you come in and you are the house parents. You live in the home with the children. You are their parents. You make sure they go to bed at night, take their medications. If they're sick, you take care of them. You feed them. You cook for them. You are their parents in the group home, 24 hours a day.
When you're in that setting, when do you get a break?
Well, they have a thing called respite, which foster care is usually pretty good about, which is in that particular group home, we actually got 7 days a month, where they actually had a separate facility, a separate home where you could go, and they would have another set of house parents come in for those 7 days. And you had like a 7 days away from the kids. But even during that time, it's, when we first started, we thought, we're going to go on vacation every, month. It's not like that. You spend most of the time sleeping, and they're still your kids. So even during those days when you're supposedly off, you still end up checking on them and making sure, talking to teachers at their school, and they're your kids in a very real way. And so, if I told you to take 7 days off from your kids, how many days do you think you could really take from your children? It's sort of like that. And so, yeah, it was a 24-hour experience. And so I don't recommend that as the first foster care experience for parents. It's when I make the joke, I've seen everything at least twice, so nothing shocks me anymore. So, but it served as a great experience. We did that for a year, and now that we do foster care in our home, it's almost like, this is easy compared to having 14 teenagers, always with all from traumatic backgrounds and backgrounds of abuse. To dealing with that, now dealing with, one or two kids in your home it's a piece of cake now. It's not really a piece of cake. Let me just throw that out there, but relatively speaking.
So was there something, was there a catalyst that you know, pushed you guys to say, okay, we got to get out of the group home and get this, go into the other direction of using, being foster parents within our home, where it's one or two or three children or whatever that looks like?
Well, we when we were at the group home, we got called into a meeting, and the group home actually had another school. They owned a school for autistic children as well. And they decided that they were going to shut down the group home side and just concentrate on the school side. And Marty and I always talk about, if they had never shut down that group home, we would probably still be there. Because although it was very hard, we couldn't leave those kids. You know what I mean? Like we were being pushed out. So they gave us a month. We found, because the group home was our housing, our transportation, everything. So, and our job. So, within the month, we got our own apartment, and we took about a month off before we started doing foster care again. And the home just felt empty. And so that's, how we started. We were literally pushed out of the group home, which I think was good because we would still be there.
So the short answer is we didn't leave the group home. The group home just went away. There's no group home there anymore.
So basically they laid you guys off, huh? Fired you guys and told you to move on to the next thing in your life.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the group home itself just shut down. There's no group home there anymore. They closed the group home down. So it was, well, I guess we have to go find something else now. So,
God has a sense of humor, doesn't he?
But yeah. And so he does.
He does.
When he wants you to move, he makes it pretty obvious. He doesn't beat around the bush.
Yeah. Here's God, should I go down this street? Well, that sign says dead end, so you decide.
Yeah. And the street's on fire.
Right.
Just in case you're wondering. So
and everybody is running the opposite direction.
Right. So take the hint.
Yeah. So okay, so you guys start doing this in your home. Let me ask, this is a little bit of a segue, but we'll come right back to this question of a place where you guys are now doing this in your home. Is it true that I shouldn't ask it, is it true, but what's your take or what's your response to that notion that there are some people who get into this just for the money?
Oh, that's a fact. In fact, people get into it for all kinds of weird reasons. When we did the initial foster care training, I mean, you look around at the people that are there for the training, and for example, there was an older gentleman who literally in the training kept going, so when I start doing foster care, I only want teenage girls, just teenage girls in my home. Is that okay? And you go, no, that is not okay. It's kind of scary that he was even permitted to get that far as to be in the training, because it was just, I don't like using the term bad vibes, but when you talk about, you get chills down your spine going, ooh, he should not, there's something wrong with this man. And then you have other people, especially doing therapeutic foster care. I mean, we had a lady who had a daycare in her home and wanted to operate a foster care residence in the other side of her home in the foster care training. And she made no bones about that this was a business to her. She was doing it to get the money for the foster care. And they told her, you can't do that. You can't, that's not how this works. But yeah, I mean, there is some money involved, but it's not enough money. Like, you could make more money working at Sears. But some people think it's easy money. This is the hardest money I've ever earned in my life.
The money's for the children. It's a subsidy.
Yeah, it's not.
It's so they have clothes and food, and anyone that knows us knows we're not living.
We haven't gone on any cruises yet. We're the money is for the children. You get the money to take care of the kids, but some people get the money, and I wish this wasn't the case, but they don't handle it appropriately, and they are in it just for the money. Another surprising factor, there are people that get into it for they like the way people talk about them when they say, I'm a therapeutic foster parent. But they like that they live off of, oh, you're a foster parent. Oh, you poor sweet, you wonderful person, you. And they do it for the praise, which is another terrible reason to do this sort of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons, but yeah, people do it for them, and we've seen case after case.
And sadly, there is such a need for foster kids. Marty and I were looking up, such a need for foster families. I'm sorry. Marty and I were looking up some statistics, and on average, every 2 minutes, one child enters foster care. So there's about 437,000 children in America in foster care right now. And so, unfortunately,
what's that number again?
To be 437,000 in America. And so these kids, that need these homes, the state isn't, the system is extremely broken. I mean, that's a whole nother episode. But I just feel like they're willing to take anybody who will foster kids because there's just such a need, It's okay, well, let's look over this small part, and they don't have the manpower to.
Yeah, they're taking anyone because, for example, the number one reason children are removed from homes is because of drug abuse. That's the number one reason why children end up being removed from homes, because of drug-related issues. In Florida, where we live, is one of the highest states for children being removed from their homes because of the huge opioid crisis, am I saying that correctly, in our state. And so when I say there are kids with no place to go in the system, there's just not enough families. There's not enough people to take care of them. There was a case with an agency here in Florida. I don't want to name the agency. If you feel like Googling it, you'll find it pretty easy. Foster care agency that would literally load kids in a van, take them to a Wawa parking lot, a convenience store parking lot, and they would just stay there all day because there was nowhere else to take the kids. The schools wouldn't have them. There were no homes. And so you have these kids, teenagers, in a van all day, playing on their phones, hooking up to the Wi-Fi at the convenience store, because there was literally nowhere else for them to go. And you look at a system like that and you go, they're so inundated with this huge need. It's like my mind can't even wrap around it sometimes. And so, yeah, some people become foster parents, and it's kind of hard if somebody meets all the qualifications, even if they have terrible motives for doing it, they can still not end up being foster parents because the need is so great. There's just nowhere to put all of these kids. So,
wow.
The downside to that is the impact it's having on the children.
I was sitting here just thinking about that.
Kid who had to sit in a van all day. And so, and that is one of our struggles that we dealing with the systems, because sometimes these kids, they just become numbers. You know what I mean? They're just another case file that needs to be closed, another number that needs to be a place to put in, plugged into. And they stop becoming human lives to some people. And that's one of the things we said when we first started doing foster care is once our motives are wrong, once we become burnt out and we no longer see these children as children, but see them as just another case to come through, then we're going to stop doing it. We you know what I mean? We can't do it that way, because that's not why we started doing it. And so, yeah, I mean, the system, if you really look into what's going on, it's insane. It's literally crazy what some of the lengths they'll go to. And so, some of the, and again, I don't want to, talk about specific people, but yeah, I could go case by case and talk about foster parents that you go, man, this person shouldn't be responsible for houseplants or pets, much less children. But because the state has nowhere else to put them, they end up caring for foster kids.
Yeah, my heart just breaks. And anybody listening to this, I think anybody that has a heart, your heart just breaks at the notion that, the negligence of adults, kids get the brunt of that. And it's a horrible thing. I heard somebody say one time, almost in every facet, the worst crimes in our country or crimes that are committed against children in any way, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. So if somebody is listening to this and they're asking the question, okay, what can I do? Or, what are the steps that I should take here? If I want it. So I want to answer this way, or ask this way. So everybody, may not be equipped to be foster parents, right? Or foster homes. Right. So if they are, what should they do? If they have a desire for that and they're equipped to it, what should they do? The second part of that, if they're not wired for that, or they don't have the capacity or the space, what are the ways that they maybe can help the system or help kids or help the process? So sort of a two-part question there.
I think the first step, without being too obvious, is to pray. Don't make any steps into foster care, into doing this kind of thing, if you're not prayed up, if you haven't spent time thinking about it, praying about it. Don't jump into anything prematurely. I had a ministry friend when I used to live in New York City who was very involved with children's ministry. He said that I used to pray because I wanted to pray. Now I pray because I have to pray to make it. And I think foster care is a lot like that. You have to start with prayer. Is this really something God has called you to do? And the second step is start researching. Find out who your local foster care agencies are. Start making inquiries. Just ask questions. You can start on Google, local foster care agencies, and start getting involved in the process. The training, in most cases, is free, but you have to make a several-week commitment. And it's training, there's testing. They will inspect your home. So you have to have your home, certain things you have to have, you have to have fire extinguishers, and fridge has to be a certain temperature and all those things. So it takes a certain amount of commitment on your part. You can't just have a kid come into your house and, but there's also an emotional investment you have to be prepared for. You're taking kids into your home that are already preloaded with hurt, and they come to you with trainings in behavior that you did not train them in. These are not your biological children that you got to train from birth. So you have to expect some behaviors that are outside what you're comfortable dealing with. And so I know a lot of foster parents that get into it, and then the child comes into their home and throws a fit or breaks a piece of furniture, or just does some crazy behaviors because that's how they've learned to deal with all the things that have happened to them and their emotions. And the foster parents kind of throw their hands up and go, I can't do this anymore. We had a lady that was a friend of ours that recently adopted a foster child. And after 3 weeks said, I can't have this child in my home anymore. The child moved into their home and was fighting her other kids and punching holes in the wall and running out in the street screaming and cursing. And this child is 11, to the point where the prospective adoptive mother said, I had no idea this is what it was going to be like. And so she asked to have the child removed. And so there's some emotional commitment you have to be ready to make, to be aware of what you're getting into. So do your research, look into it. It's one thing to say, I want to open my home to a kid. It's not going to be all baking cookies and decorating flowers. You're going to have to deal with some real issues. And if you're not emotionally equipped to do that, you might want to do a little more praying, or do a little more training, do a little more studying. For those who don't want to foster kids and want to get involved, again, pray about it. Foster care agencies, everything from volunteers. There's the GAL, or Guardian Ad Litem program. You can see about getting involved with that. That helps some of the kids. There's other programs. There's what's the one, the guy who was at the school that time, I can't remember the name, but they're like they're not foster parents per se, but they sort of assume the role of advocating for the child with schools and with other agencies. You can look into that. You can donate goods. There's always needs for clothes, mattresses, food, shoes. I mean, with so many kids in the system, if you have, extra things that kids can use, I don't know of a foster care agency anywhere that won't take them or can recommend a place to, there's foster care groups on Facebook and on Instagram that you can look into that will accept donations for foster care. I mean, you can get as involved as you're willing to. It just takes just do a little research.
And a huge, very real need is luggage, backpacks. Like when you see these things on Facebook, like kids taking their stuff in garbage bags from home to home, that is a very real thing. I can count on one hand the amount of kids that have come into our home with actual luggage. It's always in bags and, and it's just heartbreaking. Like imagine, every couple of months packing up everything you own in some garbage bags and moving in to a stranger's house.
I mean, it's almost become kind of a joke in the system of garbage bags is their luggage. I mean, imagine as an adult, if you had to get rid of almost everything that you own, your home, most of your clothes, all of your things that you've ever bought, and then pack just enough clothes and stuff that you can carry in a garbage bag, and that's all you have. Everything else is gone, and you have a garbage bag of stuff that you take with you to a new place to meet strangers and live in their home with this stuff. Small things like luggage that provide a little bit of dignity go a long way. I mean,
wow.
Yeah,
wow.
And Marty did talk about the Guardian Ad Litem program, and I can't speak highly enough about that program. And basically what that is you're an advocate for that child. You go to court with that child, you speak in that child's best interest. So that is a very real way to help a child. And so, but it's a volunteer position, and it does take some time. You have to visit the child. I think it's once a month, and there, you go to court dates. You're very involved in that child's case. So if you can't have a child in your home, you can still advocate for a child.
This has been absolutely amazing. I think we raised a number of issues today. We talked about the importance of, regardless of who you are as an adult, being very sensitive to the words that you speak in a child's life. We talked about the real the depth, both physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, of what that looks like with in this case, it's a child, but essentially it's an unanswered prayer, right? And how we draw closer to God and closer to our spouse and other healthy folks in those seasons where we have those questions. In fact, that God can actually handle our questions. And then you guys provided an incredible insight and framework for understanding fostering and foster care system. And we didn't have enough time today to get into some of the challenges with the foster care system. I've heard you guys at points talk about that, but that's for another time and another space that maybe we'll get into. I simply wanted to raise this as a reality, and I want to talk to community leaders, government leaders. I want to talk to pastors. I want to talk to other husbands and wives and people out there, aunts and uncles and cousins, the village, right? I want to talk to the village just for a moment to say that we really need to be discerning and sensitive to the reality that when you encounter families or husbands and wives or kids, that everybody doesn't still fit the nuclear family as been historically defined. Here it is, you have someone like Marty and Jeanine who literally pour their life out to help other children and children who they didn't birth to have a fresh start, and that they could be a safe haven for children to have hope restored and renewed in faith. And they do have rules. I mean, they make their children, come to church and they talk about God, and they, have rules, and it's tough, and it's, things that they've had to work through and wrestle with, and, even, having battles with the real parents while a child has become, attached to them, and just so there's all kinds of other layers there. And we may have you guys back on at some point to kind of walk through some of those realities. But I simply wanted to say, raise that awareness for our listeners. But I also want to say publicly, thank you, Marty. Thank you, Jeanine. And if you're out here listening and you are a Marty or a Jeanine in your own right, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing to change the future of a child, right? And so I'll say to you, Marty, I'll say to you, Jeanine, you guys, man, you guys are planting seeds that will reap a continual harvest in the lives of these soon-to-be adults. And thank you for doing that, and thank you for the sacrifices that you made. The verse that comes to mind, I can't remember exactly where it is right now, but the verse says that God will not forget your labor of love, right? And that's just, that's the verse that struck my heart there, because you guys are you're being selfless enough to bring the kingdom here on earth, and do that in the life of a child. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you for having us on. It's
our pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we do. We didn't. Oh, go ahead. I was going to say we didn't get a chance to get into some of the sort of rewards of doing this. Also, I mean, there is some when you see a child reunited with their family, or when a child that you thought hated you, they hit you up on social media and they just say thank you for. I mean, it's, and again, I hate going into cliches, but I mean, the little things like that really do kind of keep you going and show you that you are making a difference and that it is worth it. So,
amen.
But yeah.
That's awesome. All right, so guys, let's have a little fun. I don't know how we're going to do this. I think I want to. Jeanine's been kind of quiet today at points, so I think I may throw her on the hot seat. But at the end of every episode, I do these quick fire questions, and it's you just got to answer it with the first thought that comes to mind. It's a way for me to have a little fun with my guests that are on. And I've never had two guests on where I had to do the quick fire questions. So like eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So Jeanine, you get to go.
All right.
All right. So here we go. So you got to answer the question with the first thought that comes to your mind. All right. Are you ready?
I guess.
All right.
Yes.
Apple or PC?
PC.
Boo! Interview over. No, I'm just kidding.
we do have iPhones though. Does that count? Does that count for anything?
I don't know. All right. Favorite food, Jeanine?
Tacos.
Favorite movie?
Life is Beautiful.
Favorite TV show?
This Is Us.
Favorite quote?
Don't
look at me. He's asking you.
I don't know.
She doesn't have one then. Okay.
Yeah, I don't have one.
All right.
I have lots of them, so.
All right. Top 3 items on your bucket list.
To go to Haiti for one. Number 2, to go to Arizona, and because I've always wanted to see the Grand Canyon. And number 3, eventually own our own type of group home or something like that, a safe place where kids can go.
Gosh, Jeanine, like your bucket list is such a tearjerker bucket list. Like, God, like how do you like that's such a bucket list, you know?
Well, I've always wanted to go to Haiti ever since I was little. Like, it's just always been on my heart.
All right. Other than the Bible, what book has had the most impact on your life?
That's a hard question because I read a lot. There is a book. It's called The Same Kind of Different as Me. I would have to look it up. But it's a true story, and it's about this rich man that befriends this homeless man, and just how their relationship, changed both of their lives. And it had a really big impact on me.
All right. What's been the funniest thing that's ever happened to you?
The funniest thing that's ever happened to me. I would say marrying Marty. I mean, we grew up in church together. He's 11 years older than me, so I never thought, I would marry him. And then, I think God has a huge sense of humor, and he thought after, 25 years, he would bring me back to him, which, that was pretty hilarious.
All right. Your favorite subject in high school?
I would say it would have been English.
All right. And the last question, did you win any superlatives in high school?
No.
All right.
We moved around a lot, so I was never in a school long enough.
Oh, got it. So Marty, I am going to give you sort of the final word here to say or share anything that, you feel like you wanted to share, that you're prepared to share, that you didn't get an opportunity just through our conversation and dialogue today.
I think if to anyone listening to this, I think that it's really easy to see the problems and become overwhelmed, or to think, well, I can't be a foster parent. There's nothing I can do. But I used to work in a ministry in New York City, and the head of that ministry had a saying. He'd say, when you see the need, that's God making the call. And of course, the joke we always say is if you need a burning bush to appear to tell you what to do, I'll happily come to your house and set your shrubs on fire. But when you see the need, that's God's call in your life for the day. So, I mean, if it's not foster care, we got into this because we saw the need and we felt that tug in our heart because of our past, because of the passion God put in us, and we just started. And if you had asked us, 5 years ago, if we'd be where we are now, we're in the process of adopting a 14-year-old girl, which is something we never thought, in a million years we'd do. But it all started with, hey, let's look into this foster care thing. Let's Google it and get involved. So get involved in something. There's a lot of needs out there, and maybe you're not called to work with children. I know a lot of people don't feel that call. They're not comfortable. Pray about it. I know I've said that a lot, but seriously, pray about it. I think it's become kind of a cliche in churches. If you ask somebody, can you help me with? And they say, I'll pray about it. What they're really saying is, no, I'm not going to help. I'll pray about it has become an excuse. But when I say pray about it, I mean, really pray about it. What needs, usually the needs are right in front of you if you're looking. So get involved. That's how you make a difference. That's what God's looking for. If you're not sure what to do, great. You're in a great position to be. I always tell when you admit, I do not have what it takes to do this. Because then you're creating space for God to get involved. You're saying, God, this is beyond, I have a desire, but it's beyond my ability. And that's when you're going to see God move. That's when God steps in and will blow your mind. So without beating around the bush or talking on too much longer, just get involved. Do something. See the need, make up your mind, and do something, and then watch God work. So,
amen. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Marty and Jeanine White, foster care parents of the year. Thank you so much for being on the Wise Idea podcast. This has been incredible. Our goal is to provide tools and strategies for hearts to live inspired and heads to live wise. And I believe that we did that in a fresh way today. I believe that we planted the seed and gave some people some things to think about. Just remember that we have to take care of the generation now, because in just a few years, they're going to be taking care of us. Right. So thank you guys for being on today. All of you that are on, thank you for tuning in every single week. Our announcer is going to come give you some more details. I want to invite you personally to, if you've enjoyed what you've heard, please head over to iTunes and leave a rating and a review for other listeners to find us. We are, of course, also on Google Play and Stitcher and TuneIn and Spotify, iHeartRadio. And I am very, very appreciative of all of you that use whatever platform and channel that you're on to tune in every single week. It is an incredible privilege and honor to be a part of your life and your lifestyle. So thank you so much. Listen, I'll look forward to having you back with us next week as we continue this series, Family Life. You know how I end every single episode: live wisely.
Thanks again for joining us on another episode of the Wise Idea Podcast with Christopher J. Harris. We hope you enjoyed our time together. If you did and would like additional resources and information, you can find the previous episodes, show notes, featured guest information, and more at www.thewise-ideapodcast.com. We also invite you to join the conversation on social media. The Wise Idea Podcast is on Twitter and Facebook. Find us at The Wise Idea and at our Facebook group, The Wise Idea Podcast. On Instagram, find us at The Wise Idea Podcast. Our host is also on social media. You can find him regularly on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Pinterest, all located at CJ Harris 1. Finally, if you enjoyed what you've heard, head over to iTunes and or Google Play and leave a rating and review for other listeners to find us. Our podcast is also on Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Thanks again for joining us. We will see you the next time. Live wisely.